Most penetration tests are really just vulnerability scans that are manually vetted by a person, and then reports are generated from that. And that's massively different than what threat actors are going to do, right? Threat actors are not going to use their, Nessus or Nexpose or whatever the tools are that are useful, but they're not going to base their breach on that, right? So what ends up happening is, it's actually, there's an analogy that I like to use, and I've been using it for years now, but it's like testing body armor, right? You can test body armor using a water pistol, right? A squirt gun, and it's going to pass the test, right? Or you can test it using real standards that use real rounds. If you pass the test using real rounds, probably going to be okay, right? If you pass the test using a squirt gun, I don't think I'd want to get shot with that test. Unfortunately, most vendors sell that squirt gun test.
Welcome to the Feria Techcast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today, we are joined by Adriel Desautels, a leader in cybersecurity with over 20 years of experience. Adriel founded Secure Network Operations and the Snowsoft research team whose vulnerability research helped shape modern responsible disclosure practices. He later launched Netragard, pioneering realistic threat penetration testing, what is now called red teaming, and expanding into a broad range of security services. Adrian's expertise has been featured in Forbes, The Economics, Bloomberg, and documentaries like Viceland's Cyber War. He's also a recognized speaker at major events like Black Hat USA and InfoSec World, and has contributed to several influential books on cybersecurity. So, Adriel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. So let's rewind the clock a bit. So before 0 days and red teams, so what was the first moment with a computer or technology that truly hooked you? Was there a specific hack or project that made you think, well, I think this is my calling?
Sort of. So I think I was a pretty defiant child to begin with, and my father ended up getting a computer that he told me I couldn't use. And of course, that meant that I had to use the computer, and that's what started the whole thing. you know, uh, so it started off with that. My curiosity just kept on expanding. Time went on. Modulator, demodulator, the day of the bod, right? Eventually, you had DSL modems, you had cable modems. Things got faster. I just kind of grew with that from that point forward. Just wanted to do what I wasn't supposed to do.
Amazing. I mean, that was a wonderful and brief backstory. So tell us, Adriel, you founded your first company, Secure Network Operations, back in the 1998. So, the internet was a very different place back then. So paint a picture,
Yeah.
could you paint a picture for us what cybersecurity actually looked like back then, and what the biggest threat everyone was actually missing then?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, I think it was 1998 was when we decided to put the team together. And then we really began pushing research through 2000 all the way up until 2005. The internet itself was really, I don't want to say in its infant stages, because I think the infant stages were really, late 70s, early 80s, when everything was really new. But I think the internet, as far as businesses beginning to adopt it and e-commerce becoming a thing, that really became something interesting. Um, and hackers began monetizing their activities more and more, going after, credit card companies and so on. Now, pre-PCI DSS, offensive security work, like what we would do, was predominantly used for companies that had really sensitive things to protect, and they really wanted to be hacked, right? Legitimately hacked by the good guys, so they could understand how to prevent themselves from getting hacked by the bad guys. And so we did a lot of that. We focused on infrastructure, penetration testing, social engineering, real red teaming, doing what the bad guys might do. Um, the other thing that we did too was we performed quite a bit of research because we realized that everybody said their technology was secure, and yet everything was exploitable. So one of the things that put us in the books, it's all over the news, is we decided to dig into HP's True 64. That was supposed to be a C-level system, I think it was, and we found an abundance of remotely exploitable vulnerabilities. Now, at that time, there were no real practices for vulnerability disclosure, how to approach companies and work with them. So we did what we could. We contacted HP, talked to a guy named Kent, and we said, hey, we did this research. We have these issues. We'd like to report them to you and get them fixed. He's amicable. And then after we submitted the vulnerabilities, we got this threat about the Computer Crime Act of 1984, I think it was. And so we contacted him again and we said, we didn't violate anything. We didn't hack anything. This is purely research. And we found vulnerabilities in your technology that we think you might like to fix. Uh, got off the phone, everything seemed good. Then we got the DMCA threat from HP. And that quickly escalated. That became news. And eventually they backed down on the whole thing. And I didn't know it at the time, but that entire situation was something that was or is even referenced frequently when the idea of full disclosure comes into play, right? So at around that same time, we also discovered that vulnerabilities could be sold, specifically exploits that would give you access to systems. Found that out because we were talking with somebody that was interested in buying a vulnerability for XMMS, which was an MP3 player back in the day, if I recall correctly. And they kept on pushing on this, so we threw a random price up. We had no idea what it was off for. I think it started at about 16,000. And he said, sure. I thought, well, why would you spend this much money on a vulnerability for an MP3 player, right? So the next time this person called asking for something, we upped the price. We just kept on increasing the price. And we never ran into resistance. We thought, all right, there's a there's a definite market here for doing this kind of research. At some point before, oh no, I want to say after Netragard started, so after Snowsoft was sold off and shut down for the most part, and after Netragard started, I had a change in philosophy. I recognized that businesses were just not protecting themselves and they weren't patching quickly enough. So I decided that disclosure of vulnerabilities was actually more dangerous than even hoarding 0 days. And silent disclosure was even more dangerous. And it was because you could publish a vulnerability, threat actors are going to pick that up and they're going to learn how to exploit it. If the exploit isn't readily available, they're going to use it to breach systems, right? And then they're going to get in. Meanwhile, people aren't patching fast enough. So, okay, people say, well, why don't you just do responsible disclosure through, quiet channels so they just fix things in patches? Well, one of the things that threat actors do on Patch Tuesday is they reverse engineer the patches and build exploits because they know that not everybody is going to be patching things, and so Patch Tuesday becomes something. So it was around that point that I began to sort of shift my whole philosophy away from full disclosure and responsible disclosure. I think it's still something that should be done, but I'm not exactly sure how to do it without arming the bad guys if the good guys aren't going to take care of themselves. So that was kind of a tangent. I guess it gave some coverage. I, I guess too, to kind of keep going on this role that I'm on here. Uh, in 2003 and 2004, and this has to do with how Netragard came into being. PCI and Mastercard and Visa got together and they created PCI DSS, right? The payment card industry data security standard. And the whole concept was they were going to deal with this new challenge of hackers breaking into companies and stealing credit card information and trying to sell it and monetize it. And so they put together this standard that said if you're going to be dealing with credit cards online or processing credit cards, you have to have a penetration test. Sounds great. What they didn't do is they didn't define any kind of level of quality or anything for what a penetration test really was, which is basically you have to have a pen test. So what ended up happening was entrepreneurs. I can't ding them for this. They're smart. They decided, hey, there's an opportunity here where we can make an abundance of money by taking Nessus, which was still in its early stages. We can run a vulnerability scan, call it a penetration test, and then they got a penetration test and we make money. So all of a sudden, you had penetration testing companies all over the place that weren't really penetration testing companies. And so Snowsoft kept going with the realistic penetration testing. When I moved out of Snow or shut down Snowsoft in 2006, I was approached by a former customer that said, Adriel, we need a real pen test. And I said, well, okay, let's find a vendor. We went and we searched and we actually found a very well-known vendor today. They're around, they still sell software, they do lots of things. And they promised to do a manual test. They actually put it in writing. They didn't know that we'd set up our own little flight recorder in the network so we could watch what they were doing. And we ended up watching the penetration test, and we saw that they ran a vulnerability scan. They ran a vulnerability scan again. They did some manual probing, and they ran the scan last time, produced a report. It wasn't manual. It was chock full of false positives. And so my contact said, we want you to do it. So we ended up doing the test, and we found a blind SQL injection vulnerability that was behind two different layers of protection. I can't for the life of me remember what those were. I want to say tipping point or something, but that's not what it was. Anyways, we realized that they were behind two different levels of protection, but we also knew that Microsoft SQL had this weird reverse command. And so we thought, well, maybe if we read our entire payload backwards, we can, get the XP command shell, which is kind of what we were looking for anyways. And we wrote the payload backwards and sent it, and lo and behold, it was successful. So it was something like 4 minutes to breach. They were surprised that we got in so quickly, and they were surprised, I think, at the quality of our work too. And word of mouth does wonders. So Netragard was born, and here we are. Really out of a necessity for real testing, as opposed to what I would call industry standard, industry norm, unfortunately. So how was that for a big long intro?
Well, that was amazing. It was quite an interesting story. So tell us, Adriel, so you often say we protect you from people like us. I think that's quite evocative. So, I mean, who are the people like you, and what's their typical day like?
Yeah, so the people like me are, I guess it would be people with the same skill sets, curiosities, capabilities, and interests as the bad guys. But the primary difference is that we've got ethics and we care about doing the right thing. We care about, really being good and being able to wake up in the morning and look at ourselves and say, hey, you see yourself in the mirror, you want to think you're a good person, not, wow, I'm a terrible person that just stole whatever. Um, and I think it's that ethical sort of line that we just refuse to cross. That's really what that slogan represents. Now, the slogan itself actually came out of a conversation I was having with one of my friends, name is Gil. We were driving back. This was in the early 90s. We were driving back from work together. So I started working in the industry at a young age. And he and I were joking, and he said, Adriel, you should start a company and your slogan should be, we protect you from people like us. So we both thought that it was the funniest thing ever, had no idea to actually use it. So here we are with the slogan, but it fits quite well. Yeah, and it is provocative.
Yeah. It's quite an amazing slogan, I would say. So, tell us, Snowsoft research team helped shape modern responsible disclosure. Yeah. So I have to ask, was there a specific or that oh crap moment that convinced you and the industry that these rules of engagement were desperately needed?
Yeah, so it was that the thing that I described earlier. It was the um, entire incident with Hewlett Packard. Um, we realized that these businesses that were, building up this monstrosity that was the internet, uh, were doing it with good intentions, but truly did not understand computer security, network security, any of that stuff. It just, it wasn't a well understood subject back then. Um, and we realized that when we were approaching these companies to tell them about flaws or holes that they had in their systems, their first reaction was to be defensive because they felt threatened. It's like calling somebody's kid ugly. You're going to get a response that you don't really want. Um, and so we actually worked on that, and throughout Snowsoft after that point, and even for a good period of time with Netragard, we just kept on refining the process of approaching companies, using the right language, understanding how to come across as friendly, trying to diffuse situations up front, with the way you approach them so you don't come across like a threat. Make it clear you want to work for them. Make it clear you're not trying to extort them. Um, yeah, so that entire thing kind of grew out of that first big incident with us. Um, and we've had other issues. I mean, nothing that was quite as notable, but we've had issues where we wanted to go and report a vulnerability to somebody because we wanted them to fix an issue. And companies sometimes that with us, they said, no, we're not going to fix it. And, why are we even looking at our technology? And in those cases, disclosure becomes a bit different. We say, well, if you're not going to fix it, the public has a right to know about it. So we'll publish the vulnerability, we'll publish an advisory, and your customers can decide for you if you are going to fix this or not. And typically when that kind of pressure comes into play, they do jump on it and fix it, but it's not really favorable. I think I think that was more of a thing of the past though, because these days when you approach a business and so many people have bug bounties, they welcome researchers now. They don't look at us or penetration testers or whatever as the bad guys. They recognize that this is actually something that's going to benefit them and help them. Um, but it was definitely interesting to see that process evolve from they want to beat us up to where they're best friends. It was quite something.
Uh, Interesting. So, please explain red teaming to me
Yeah,
like I'm a curious smart friend sitting next to you at a bar with no real experience on these things.
yeah. So the difference between a penetration test and a red team predominantly is that a red team is objective driven. It's like a it's like a mission, right? Like a spy game almost. It's like a mission. We're we're given a task that has certain goals that we want to accomplish, right? And a penetration test is more um, the type of thing where we're going to come into an infrastructure or explore an application, and we try to identify as many vulnerabilities as we can that are of value, not noise that's useless, but actually things that deliver value to the customer. Now, both of them help the customers advance their security posture in different ways. So the penetration test identifies value in terms of where your vulnerabilities exist and sort of how an attacker is going to breach your infrastructure and what you can do to harden things. The red team engagement, though, gives you a much more aggressive and advanced test, and it tells you how well you're going to fare against a really motivated threat actor, and how that threat actor is most likely to breach your infrastructure, how they're going to, get those objectives or handle those objectives. So a red team engagement typically involves, at least ours, they typically involve you know, anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, depending on what happens, of reconnaissance work, where we study people, we look at breaches from the past, not necessarily from them, but records that have been stolen from third parties. We build effective dossiers. We know where they live, where they work, who their family members are, the whole 9 yards. We really dive in. It can get pretty creepy. Um, and then in doing that, we begin to formulate things that we think might be methods of attack just based on the intelligence, like you would for any real military operation for that matter, right? You're going to know what you're going to do, plan it. Then we begin planning. And when the time is right, after we have our infrastructure set up, and we do have our own proprietary command and control infrastructure on C2, we don't use anything off the shelf really for that, which is nice. So once we have that all set up, we will launch the attacks and try to get at our objectives. The objectives can be things like gain access to these files, take photographs of these documents, capture whatever in whatever system. Um, in fact, in one that we're, well, it's fairly active right now, we actually uh, had to physically breach the office in a fairly protected area, and we ended up planting hardware bugs into the office into various different systems. So we could access the network, so we could record keystrokes, we could record screenshots and all that. And the objective there is really to help them understand how to protect themselves from the type of threat that they're likely to face, right? So at the end of these engagements, both engagements, you're going to get reports that are very different. The report that you get from a red team type project is um, it's kind of like a narrative or like a story that goes in order. It says, well, we did this, we did that, here's how this happened, here's where this worked, and here's what you can do to prevent this type of thing from happening again, right? With penetration testing, you get a report that's, I guess, there is narrative to it. There's usually a description of what happens, sort of the story. But then there's a technical section that just lists out every single vulnerability and scores the vulnerabilities based on, CVSS or DREAD, whatever, any of the scoring systems that are out there. And that enables, for the prioritization of what to fix and so on. Red teaming is different. Because it's not so much focused on vulnerability scoring and full coverage, right? It's focused on objectives and it's focused on doing whatever it takes to get around whatever security you have. And frankly, it's just about always successful unless the project is cut short. So it's a very different operation.
Uh, Amazing. So, can you walk us through a time that a red team exercise revealed a vulnerability that was far more serious or scary than anyone expected?
Um, so a red team, I don't know that it would necessarily expose vulnerabilities that are far worse than anybody expected, but it would definitely identify methods of entry that people wouldn't anticipate. Whereas a penetration test, on the other hand, like our platinum level, which is our high tier penetration test, um, definitely uh, more than one occasion has uncovered vulnerabilities, that led to really unexpected results. I mean, a great example is we did a web application penetration test against a large application for a large software company that I think everybody knows and uses every day. They were going to push out this application on schedule, and they expected this application to pass the test perfectly fine. Um, when we began testing, we very quickly began finding vulnerabilities, and it was just a matter of days until we recognized that the architecture of the application was just not conducive to good security. So it wasn't so much that you could fix a vulnerability or you could patch something, it was that the application itself by design had to be completely rebuilt. And that was a big problem because this company had spent millions of dollars preparing to get this thing launched and development and all that. They were not happy with the findings because it wasn't a check in the box. It wasn't, hey, go ahead and do this. And they were also at the same time happy with the findings because if they had released this thing, it would have been terrible. I mean, I think the average cost of a breach last year was $4.8 million. So it wasn't last year, it was a few years back, but still. So I think while they were unhappy with the results, they were happy also because they didn't lose a bunch of money in a breach later, you know. But there have been other instances too, where people think that they're perfectly safe and secure. And I mean, state departments actually. There was one that we did a while ago. I can't say which one it was, of course, but these guys were supposed to be the poster childs for good security, right? Um, we breached really easily using an outdated, or vulnerability, an outdated firewall. And then we quickly realized that these guys had a policy of never changing their passwords internally because they read something from Bruce Schneier that said changing your passwords puts you at risk. So they had passwords that dated back to like 2009, you know. Um, and we also learned that passwords were the name of this entity and the year that the person came on. So logging into anything was a matter of name and year. You can enumerate that pretty quickly, right? So I mean, I think it took us less than 45 minutes to compromise everything in that case. Um, the uh, the person in charge of that particular agency, department, whatever you want to call it, um, was really shocked and frustrated at the same time, right? And I don't really know what their opinion was towards the end of it, but I know that the person that was just under him that was responsible for security it misrepresented how secure they actually were, versus what was going on. So I found a lot of stuff that nobody expected us to find, and it definitely ruffled some feathers too, right? So you can go both directions. I've got to kind of say we don't like ruffling feathers. We'd rather come in and help you and kind of make you the hero in most cases, but there are the outliers, where these kinds of things can happen for sure.
So, you've been an expert in you've been an expert witness in federal court. So, how does that experience
Yeah.
shape or change your perspective on the work you do? Like, does it add a heavier sense of consequence to finding a vulnerability?
No, it definitely makes me never want to do it again, though. I mean, it was uh, it was most probably the highest stress thing that I've done, and the least rewarding from an emotional perspective and a satisfaction perspective. I mean, it was the case that I was involved with was corporate espionage case. We had everybody dead to rights. We caught everything, and in fact, we even knew exactly who the person was because the person that was attacking our customer uh, somehow managed to push their username from the infrastructure that they're on into our customer's network accidentally. And so, so we knew who this person was really quickly. Um, but it wasn't gratifying. I mean, what ended up actually happening was the offending company was much larger than our customer, and they ended up just throwing an extraordinary amount of money at our customer and bought our customer, and that was the end of it. They just bought them out, and so the entire case disappeared. Yeah, it wasn't a good time. I did not enjoy that at all.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah,
it sounds like quite an experience. Yeah, so
it was.
Adriel, everybody talks about AI now. So from your vantage point, is AI mostly a new tool for security teams, or is it just another powerful new weapon for attackers, or is it both? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
It's both. Yeah, it's both. I mean, the important thing to understand about AI is that it's not. I mean, it shouldn't be called artificial intelligence. It should be called like good prediction or something because it's just basically a prediction engine, right? AI is kind of like, and I can't take credit for this because somebody else said this, but AI is sort of like humanity's mirror because it knows everything that we've told it to know, and it makes its predictions based on everything that we've told it to predict. Um, but it's not. I don't know. It's not as awesome as people think it is. Like you have companies out there that make claims about AI penetration testing being a threat to penetration testing vendors. Well, maybe if you're doing what we call the squirt gun penetration test, right? Maybe if you're just running a scan and putting a check in the box, then AI is a threat to you because it's going to work slightly better than a scanner. Uh, but it can't compete with the human in terms of intuition and intelligence and sort of the ability to jump to conclusions, the art of what hacking is and creativity. Um, in fact, there was a company recently, or maybe it was last year, they came up with what they called an experiment that was very biased towards the AI in terms of time, where they pit their AI against a team of penetration testers, and they were supposed to go after a particular web application. They gave both sides 1 week. I think it was actually 40 hours to do the testing. I mean, the AI outperformed them and completed the work, I think, in 20 minutes, whereas the team ran out of time at the end of the week. The quality of the findings from the team, from the humans, was higher, but the AI found more vulnerabilities, right? Now, if you had given the human beings the same amount of time that the AI had in equivalency, right, in terms of speed and power, humans would have crushed the AI. Um, so AI really is an effective sidekick. It's a tool that you can use to make things more efficient, that you can use to, automate mundane tasks, but it's not really a tool that you can use yet to do things that are novel or artistic or truly creative, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's powerful. I mean, of course, if you're a radiologist or something like that, then you should be afraid because AI can do that quite well. So it is going to be very disruptive. Um, but in terms of cybersecurity and who's using it, I think it's going to be helpful. Threat actors use AI too, of course, for different types of things. You hear people talk about deep fakes, um, amongst other things, and really what we see more of is people using AI to generate emails, you know, um, and sometimes using AI to automate certain processes. In fact, I read about a piece of malware recently that used AI to help it sort of filter through operating systems, right, and find files and things. And that proved to be a real challenge because there's no common signature for that type of thing, right? So detecting that or preventing that's going to be challenging. But yeah, it goes both ways.
Oh, well, that was quite a great response there. So tell us, Adriel, based on your 20 plus years experience in the field, so what's the most common misconceptions you see companies have about their own security when they first come to you?
Oh boy. So I think that when they come to us specifically, the most common misconception is that penetration testing is penetration testing. They don't seem to realize, or they don't realize, that most penetration tests are really just vulnerability scans that are manually vetted by a person, and then reports are generated from that. And that's massively different than what threat actors are going to do, right? Threat actors are not going to use their, Nessus or Nexpose or whatever the tools are that are useful, but they're not going to base their breach on that, right? So what ends up happening is, it's actually, there's an analogy that I like to use, and I've been using it for years now, but it's like testing body armor, right? You can test body armor using a water pistol, right, a squirt gun, and it's going to pass the test, right? Or you can test it using real standards that use real rounds. If you pass the test using real rounds, probably going to be okay, right? If you pass the test using a squirt gun, I don't think I'd want to get shot with that vest. Unfortunately, most vendors sell that squirt gun test, um, and I think that's where the biggest misconception comes into play, because these vendors, every vendor markets themselves as a best in class. Um, they all, promise the best results. It's all the same language, but when it comes down to really delivering it, they don't deliver it. Um, so I think there's that, and there are ways to clear it up. I mean, there are some really easy telltale signs, right? Whether or not you're working with a vendor that is worth their salt, or you're working with a vendor that's just going to scan you. One of the biggest ones is the way they price. If a vendor is going to determine the cost of a service by how many IP addresses you have, they can't really care about how much manual work there is, because every IP address could potentially do something different. 10 IP is $5,000. That doesn't reflect work. So if they do that, and there's 40 hours of work, this 400 hours, total across the 10 IP is 40 hours, and just arbitrarily speaking, um, and they've only quoted you at $5,000, that test is going to be mostly automated because they have to replace all those human hours. They still have to deliver the product, right? Whereas if you work with a penetration testing vendor that cares about security, um, they're going to take the time, or not cares about security, but that's going to deliver services manually, like really get hands on. They're going to take the time to assess your workload. They're not just going to say, okay, you've got 10 IP addresses. If it's external, they're going to scan those IP addresses or something like Nmap and see what they're running and how they're configured, so they know how much energy has to go into testing them. If it's going to be a web application, they're not going to count pages and clicks and things like that. They're going to say, let us see your API documentation, like Swagger files, whatever it might be. Let us have a demo or a walkthrough, or give us an account so we can look through the application. Uh, Give us source code so we can actually use that as a guide to understand, what's going on. They're going to get deep. So, if you want to get a real test and you want to kind of avoid um, that mistake, because it can be quite costly, uh, pay attention to how things are being priced. And I guess I'll wrap that up by saying, there's an interesting thing you can do, right? So the ROI of good security, the return on investment of good security, is equal to the cost and damages of a single successful breach. So given, like I said earlier, last year, the average cost of a breach was 4.8 million. The average cost of a penetration test is probably between 20 and 50,000. right? So do it right and avoid that bigger price tag. You go for something cheaper, quicker, and expensive, you're going to be paying a lot more down the road.
Amazing. So, cybersecurity can be quite a high stress field. So, how do you and your team decompress after a particularly intense project? I mean, like let's say after you run a penetration test or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody. We all love what we do, so I think that this is kind of just fun and games for us in a real structured way. Like we have to do things professionally, we have to be effective, we have to deliver value, but we love it, right? It's a lot of fun. So um, I don't think that we really do get stressed out on your average day. Um, when it's towards the end of the year, like now, there's really high demand. I mean, people just they remember they have to get testing, or for whatever reason, there's last minute work. Things get really, really busy. When that happens, the workload gets really heavy, and then you do get worn out. You get tired because there's so much work. And the way that each of us decompresses is different. Like I prefer Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? Like that's my way to to relax. I go to the gym. Um, Other people, will go for a bike ride, or go to the firing range and go shooting, or just hang out with friends. It really depends, I guess, on who you are and the personality. But I think it's a different kind of stress though, because we really do love what we do.
Amazing. So, tell us, Adriel, looking back at your career, what felt like a massive failure or setback at that time, but ultimately taught you a valuable lesson?
Felt like a massive failure. So I don't know. I don't know that anything really felt like a massive failure, but there were definitely some valuable lessons. Although I don't think the lessons could have been learned without the failure, right? I think I don't know who said this either, but the path to success, or the road to success, is paved with the bricks of failure, right? So I don't think that I look at failure like something other than moving forward. I mean, I think I look at it like, this is just what has to happen to find success. So I don't think I remember failure that way. I just think, well, we have ideas. We try these ideas. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. And if they don't work, you try something else, you do something else. Of course, you try to make the best possible decision. I mean, maybe the incident with HP, maybe there's something we could have done differently there, but at that time, we did the best that we could to learn from the entire issue, right? And it turns out that it benefited a lot of people. Um, Even with Netragard, with some of the 0-day stuff that we were doing, we did the best that we could. We learned from what we did. Um, Maybe we could have done things differently there too, but I'm not exactly sure how, other than perhaps being more restrictive about who we sold to, things like that. But yeah, it's a difficult question because I guess I'm different. I don't see failure as failure. I see it as sort of a building block, right? It's like a brick. You lay it down, you step forward, right?
Wonderful, wonderful. That's quite a great perspective to see failure as a building block to, move forward. That's
Yeah,
a great one there. So,
yeah,
I have one more question, Adriel. I like to ask every guest I interview here on this podcast this question to get to know their opinion and see things through their own perspective. So tell us, what does innovation mean to you, and how does it relate to your field? I mean, in the context of cybersecurity.
yeah. Innovation means a lot of different things. I mean, you have innovation with offensive technology, ways to bypass XDRs, EDRs, trick the blue teams, the defenders. And then you also have innovation on the other side, the blue teams, how to build better detection capabilities, better response capabilities. Um, so I think innovation, I think it's everywhere. And there's so much of it, it's really difficult for me to have even a sort of a singular opinion, right? Um, it drives things forward. Usually, it's interesting though because it doesn't always succeed, right? So you create something you think is going to be incredible. Sure, it's innovative, but maybe it falls flat in its face because something else comes out. Um, I guess it's like the bleeding edge of security, right? You've got to innovate and create and grow and move forward, and it just happens so fast in this industry that uh, I don't think I could give you a clear and solid answer about any specific thing.
Well, that's already a really wonderful answer. So, finally, tell us for the listeners who are absolutely fascinated with by everything that we've talked about today, where's the best place for them to go learn more about your work, or maybe contact you, or learn more about the
Yep.
work that Netragard does?
Yeah, they can come to our website, www, or I guess there's no more www. This shows how old I am. You can just go to Netragard, Netragard, no you.com, and check out, some of the news that we post, our blog articles. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We we tend to publish quite a bit and talk not enough, but we're there. Or they can just reach out to us and ask us questions. Always happy to help. I mean, our philosophy really is one of helping, right? We think everybody should be able to afford good security, and we think everybody really deserves it for the most part. Um, so we're happy to transfer knowledge, answer questions, and do what we can do to help. That's why we're here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, it's been a really awesome conversation with you today, Adriel, and I'm really excited to have you in the show.
Thank you. You as well.